Welcome to the affair at the gift that killed the village, a tale of secrets, pride, and one fatal gift that shattered the calm of an English countryside. In the peaceful village of Kingswell, Lady Constance Whitmore is found dead, a silver-wrapped parcel beside her hand inside, a dove-shaped brooch, a symbol of peace turned omen of death. But who sent it? And why? Was it love, revenge, or something far darker? Only Hercule Poirot, with his little grey cells and unshakable precision, can uncover the truth hidden beneath the village's polite smiles. So tell us, where are you listening from tonight? Share your first theory in the comments, because before this mystery ends, you'll be questioning everyone, even the gift itself. The village of Kingswell was the kind of place that seemed immune to tragedy. Nestled amid gentle English hills, with ivy-covered cottages and gardens blooming in careful order, it was the picture of serenity. That is why the arrival of death, sudden, inexplicable, and cruel, struck like a discordant note in a piece of music otherwise too perfect. It began on a bright May morning when Lady Constance Whitmore was found dead in her drawing-room, her delicate hand clutching a small, exquisitely wrapped parcel tied with a silver ribbon. The villagers whispered that the parcel had been a gift, delivered the night before by an unknown messenger. Inside had been a simple silver brooch, a dove in flight, and yet, within an hour of opening it, Lady Constance had collapsed, her teacup shattering upon the polished floor. The doctor, summoned in haste, declared it heart failure. The police, after some murmuring about poison, found nothing conclusive. And yet, something about the scene, the immaculate placement of the cup, the peculiar calm upon her face left the entire village uneasy. It was not death that frightened them, but the manner in which it arrived. Tidy, polite, and deliberate. By afternoon, rumor had spread through Kingswell like wildfire. The brooch had been a curse. It was sent in revenge. It was meant for someone else. Every tongue in the post office, the bakery, the inn, wagged with conviction. Only one man seemed untouched by the hysteria, Inspector Dale of the County Constabulary, a square-faced fellow who trusted evidence more than whispers. He concluded it was natural causes, old heart, high excitement, he said briskly. Nothing sinister. But then came the letter, delivered the following morning to the vicarage. It was unsigned and written in an elegant, slanting hand. It was not her heart that failed. It was her conscience. The note was handed to the police, but its meaning remained a mystery. And so, as word reached London and gossip trickled into the ears of those who thrived upon intrigue, a certain Belgian gentleman with an impeccable moustache took an interest. 2 days later, a small motor car appeared on the narrow road leading to Kingswell. From it stepped a man of medium height, immaculate in grey, with patent leather shoes that gleamed even after the dust of travel. He paused, gazing about with appreciation tinged by disapproval, for though the air was fresh and the hedgerows lush, the road, he observed, was singularly uneven. "Monsieur Poirot," the driver announced, somewhat needlessly. Hercule Poirot inclined his head gravely. "Merci, Georges. The country air, it is admirable, but alas, it lacks order. It is too natural." He adjusted his hat, straightened his tie, and approached the vicarage where Inspector Dale waited to brief him. As he entered, the murmur of bees and the distant toll of the church bell faded into an expectant hush. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot," said the inspector, standing stiffly. "Thank you for coming down. It's an odd one, I admit. The village is in a right state." Poirot smiled faintly. "When the world becomes too certain, mon cher inspecteur, it is often because it has decided to stop thinking. Permit me to think for a little while, perhaps we shall see more clearly." And so began the affair at the gift that killed the village, a case where death came wrapped like a present, where kindness was the most dangerous disguise of all, and where Hercule Poirot would soon discover that beneath the calm surface of Kingswell lay envy, guilt, and a most exquisite malice. The parlour of the vicarage was modest, lined with old books and the faint scent of lavender polish. Poirot, seated precisely on the edge of a floral armchair, took in the scene with eyes that missed nothing. Inspector Dale, notebook in hand, leaned forward as though to emphasize his seriousness, though his blunt features betrayed a mild impatience with what he likely considered unnecessary finesse. "So," Dale began, "Lady Constance Whitmore, 71, widow, lived alone, save for 2 servants, housekeeper and gardener, found dead in her chair at 10 o'clock that morning. Dr. Wilby called immediately, said her heart gave out. Nothing odd there, except," he flipped through his notes, "except the parcel, small box, silver paper, no return name, the brooch inside pure silver, shaped like a dove, no trace of poison, nothing suspicious to the eye." Poirot steepled his fingers. "And yet, something is amiss. N'est ce pas? Otherwise, you would not have invited Hercule Poirot to this charming village." Dale hesitated, clearing his throat. "Well, it's that letter, you see. The one that turned up at the vicarage. The handwriting's fine, elegant, but not easy to trace. And the villagers' superstitious lot, they've been whispering about it ever since. The vicar himself insisted we call in someone of repute." He paused. "Meaning you, I suppose." Poirot inclined his head modestly. "It is always gratifying to be summoned, not because one is needed, but because one is believed to be, how do you say, a last resort of reason." His dark eyes glinted. "Tell me, who found the body?" "The housekeeper, Mrs. Larkin, came in to bring her morning tea and found Lady Constance sitting upright, eyes open, hand still resting on that parcel. Screamed blue murder, as you might imagine. The gardener came running, and they called for the doctor." "Bien, I will speak with them both," Poirot said softly. "But first, the villagers, who are they?" "You have already said. The circle is small. Let us understand the stage before we meet the players." Dale nodded. "Kingswell's quiet. But Lady Constance, she had connections. Money, land, a fine inheritance from her late husband. She funded the church roof, the library, the schoolroom. Generous to a fault, some said. But not all her gifts were well received." "Ah," Poirot smiled faintly. "And there we have it, the first note in the discord. The generosity that kills." Dale frowned. "You mean the gift itself?" Poirot spread his hands. "Perhaps, or perhaps it was symbolic. When a lady gives too much, there are always those who take offense. It wounds pride, Inspector. There are people who prefer hunger to charity, especially when it is offered with condescension." The inspector grunted but said nothing. Poirot rose, brushing an invisible speck of dust from his sleeve. "Come, let us visit the house. I must see where the lady met her end. The atmosphere, it speaks, if one listens." They walked the short path from the vicarage to Whitmore Manor, a stately Georgian home, slightly faded by time. The lawns were immaculate, though the flower beds looked tired, as if mourning their mistress. A curtain fluttered faintly in the drawing-room window. Inside, Mrs. Larkin awaited them, a stout woman with red eyes and trembling hands. She curtsied at Poirot's greeting, murmuring that she had never seen anything so dreadful. Poirot listened gently, his gaze soft but intent. "You found her, thus, sitting so?" "Yes, sir, just there, in her chair, by the fire. The cup had slipped from her lap, and the saucer was in pieces. But her face, it wasn't fright, sir. It was almost peaceful. And the parcel? On the table, sir. She'd opened it just before I came in. Said it was from an admirer, joking like, I remember, because she laughed, a real, merry laugh. Then not an hour later, the woman broke off, dabbing her eyes. Poirot nodded gravely. Merci. You have been most helpful. Tell me, did anyone visit the house the previous evening?" Mrs. Larkin hesitated. "Only Mr. Peter Allard, sir. Came about the accounts, he handles the estate. Stayed for tea. Left around 8:30. Poirot glanced briefly at the inspector, who scribbled a note. And the parcel, it was delivered when? Late that night, sir. The maid said she found it on the doorstep, wrapped neat as anything. No address but hers, no card inside. When they left the house, Poirot walked slowly down the garden path, hands clasped behind his back. The breeze stirred his coat as he spoke, half to himself. A parcel left at night, a brooch of peace sent to a lady whose conscience, someone says, failed. A lawyer who visits late and leaves early. A housekeeper who hears laughter before death. He stopped, eyes narrowing. No, no, mon ami. This is not chance. It is a play, a carefully staged play. The inspector exhaled. You think it was murder, then? Poirot smiled gently. I think, perhaps, it was a gift. But one, given with purpose, and that purpose, that we shall soon discover. Behind them, the church bell tolled faintly, and the village seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the little Belgian to begin his dance with truth. The morning mist had begun to lift from Kingswell as Poirot and Inspector Dale made their way toward the village square. The cobblestones gleamed faintly with dew, and a few shopkeepers were just lifting their shutters, pausing to stare at the strangers passing by. Poirot, his hands neatly gloved and his eyes sharp as glass, walked at an unhurried pace, every movement precise. He seemed less like a man walking and more like one measuring each step of a problem invisible to everyone but himself. The people, Inspector, Poirot murmured softly. They are watching us. They are whispering to themselves. Why has the great detective come to Kingswell? You see it. Yes? The guilt. It hides itself not only behind locked doors but behind curtains and polite smiles. Dale snorted. You'll see a lot of polite smiles here, Monsieur Poirot. They all know each other's business. Half of them are kin, and the other half have feuds dating back to their grandfathers. Poirot's moustache twitched upward. How very convenient. A village where affection and resentment live side by side, it is fertile soil for mischief. They reached the small inn, the Stag and Willow, where several of the villagers had gathered over their morning tea. The moment Poirot entered, the murmur of voices faltered. He removed his hat with quiet ceremony, bowed slightly, and introduced himself in that impeccable, musical accent. Mesdames et messieurs, I am Hercule Poirot. I come in the service of justice and truth. You will forgive me, I hope, for asking questions. It is my unfortunate habit. A few laughed nervously. The innkeeper, a thin man named Fletcher with a mild stammer, ushered them toward a table near the hearth. Everyone's been talking about poor Lady Whitmore, he said. A kind woman. Gave to everyone. Never thought such a thing could happen here. Ah, but it is always so, said Poirot, leaning slightly forward. It is in the quiet places that the loudest passions hide. He turned his gaze toward the assembled villagers. Tell me who, among you, was closest to the lady. A woman with dark, intelligent eyes raised her hand slightly. That would be me, monsieur. Eliza Crane. I manage the Women's Society. Lady Constance was our patron. Poirot smiled warmly. Then, madame, you will help me understand her. A woman who gives much, is she loved or resented? Eliza hesitated. Both, I suppose. She did good, but she liked people to remember it. Some called her proud. Still, she helped many. And the brooch? Poirot asked softly. Had she ever spoken of receiving gifts, perhaps from someone anonymous? No, Eliza replied, shaking her head. She was very particular about her possessions, hated surprises, said life offered enough shocks without inviting more. Curious, Poirot murmured, more to himself than to her. Then why open this one? There was a silence. The air seemed to tighten. Fletcher cleared his throat. Maybe she knew who it was from. Maybe it wasn't as anonymous as it looked. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Ah, now that is an interesting suggestion. Monsieur Fletcher, you think perhaps the lady recognized the sender? Fletcher shrugged, uncomfortable. I just mean well. She'd had words with Mr. Allard lately. The lawyer. Something about the trust fund she kept for the church. He was angry, said she'd changed the terms without consulting him. Indeed? Poirot said, his tone suddenly crisp. And this Allard? He lives where? Just beyond the green. Fine house. Keeps to himself, mostly. Poirot rose smoothly. Then, it is time, Inspector, that we pay him a visit. A lawyer who quarrels with a client who dies unexpectedly, voila, it is too neat not to examine. They found Peter Allard in his study, a thin man in his 40s with a pale, fastidious face and eyes that gave away nothing. The room smelled faintly of ink and brandy. He greeted them with practiced civility, though a flicker of annoyance passed behind his calm expression. I've told the police everything, he said, gesturing to the inspector. Lady Constance's death was unfortunate, but hardly my affair. She was an old woman. Poirot regarded him gently. And yet, you argued with her. About money, yes? Allard stiffened. She was whimsical, changed her mind often. It frustrated me professionally, that's all. Of course, said Poirot mildly. You are a man of order, of rules. Such people dislike unpredictability. He paused, letting the words sink in. Tell me, did you see the lady the night before she died? Allard's fingers tightened around his pen. Briefly. I left before 9. Then you saw no parcel upon her table? No. Curious, murmured Poirot. And yet it arrived soon after you left. One might almost believe it was expected. The lawyer's jaw tightened. Are you implying something, monsieur? Poirot smiled faintly. Implying? None. I am merely observing. It is my only vice. As they left, Dale muttered, You think he's the one? Poirot shook his head slowly. Non, mon ami. He is too cautious, too composed. The truly guilty, they betray themselves not in speech but in silence. Somewhere, someone in this quiet village speaks too little. And as the church bell chimed the hour, Poirot's eyes drifted toward the road leading from the manor, where a young woman in mourning black stood half hidden by the trees, watching them with a gaze that lingered too long. Poirot's gaze lingered on the young woman by the trees. She was still, almost statuesque, her dark attire giving her the look of a solitary figure in mourning, yet her composure was too deliberate, her stillness too poised to be born of simple grief. When she realized she was observed, she turned quickly and disappeared down a shaded path behind the hedgerow. Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly, the faintest trace of satisfaction flickering across his face. Inspector, he said softly, we are followed, or perhaps merely studied. Let us see which it is. They followed at a measured distance, turning past the churchyard and along the path that led toward a modest cottage framed by rose bushes gone slightly wild. The woman moved swiftly, her steps purposeful, but not hurried enough to betray panic. She opened her gate and vanished inside. Poirot stopped a few yards away. It is always interesting, mon ami, he murmured, how those who seek to remain invisible place themselves perfectly in view. Dale frowned. You know her? None, but she knows us. You will observe. She wore no veil. Though she is dressed for mourning, she wished to be seen and yet not questioned. Such contradictions they are the fingerprints of deceit. Without waiting for permission, Poirot approached the door and knocked gently. After a moment, it opened, and the young woman stood before them. Up close, she was striking her eyes, a deep grey, her manner calm but taut, as though every word she spoke were chosen after deliberation. Yes, she said, her tone polite but guarded. Forgive me, mademoiselle, said Poirot with a bow. I am Hercule Poirot. I have come concerning the unfortunate death of Lady Constance Whitmore. Something flickered in her eyes, surprise, quickly masked by composure. I know who you are, Monsieur Poirot. Everyone in the village does. I am Anna Whitmore. Lady Constance was my aunt. Ah, Poirot breathed, his expression softening. The niece. I offer my condolences. You were close to your aunt, perhaps? I lived here until last year, she said, stepping aside. You may come in. The cottage was neat but unadorned. Every object placed with careful precision. There was no trace of sentiment, no photograph upon the mantel, only a vase of fresh flowers and a desk stacked with correspondence. She was a difficult woman, Anna said once they were seated. Kind, yes, but in her own way. Her gifts always had strings, attached. People in Kingswell smiled to her face, but they hated her for her generosity. Poirot tilted his head. And you, mademoiselle, did you hate her also? Anna met his gaze without flinching. I pitied her. She needed to be adored, and no one ever truly adored her. Dale coughed, his tone brisk. You were in London, I'm told? Yes. I came down the morning after she died. The police had already been. Did your aunt ever mention receiving anonymous letters or gifts before this brooch arrived? Poirot asked softly. Anna hesitated for just a heartbeat. No, she disliked surprises. If something had arrived, she would have said so. Indeed, murmured Poirot. And yet she opened this one eagerly. That, mademoiselle, is not the act of a woman averse to the unexpected. Tell me, did she ever speak of forgiveness? Anna looked taken aback. Forgiveness? No, she was not a forgiving woman. Poirot's eyes glimmered. And yet, someone sent her a dove, the symbol of peace. How curious, to send peace to one who never practiced it. For the first time, Anna looked unsettled. Perhaps the sender meant it ironically, she said quietly. Perhaps, Poirot replied, or perhaps the sender sought her absolution. When they left the cottage, the sun was sinking behind the hill, and the village lay bathed in pale gold. Poirot walked in silence for several minutes before speaking. She lies with Grace, that one, he said softly. Dale frowned. You think she's hiding something? Mais oui, she hides sorrow, resentment, perhaps fear but not guilt. There is something she knows that she dares not say. A woman who chooses her words with such care is guarding another's secret. Dale looked doubtful. Could she be the one who sent the brooch? Poirot's smile was faint and unreadable. Possibly. But if she did, it was not to kill. It was to provoke. There is always one among the living who seeks to stir the past. As they passed the churchyard, Poirot stopped suddenly. A faint noise, a footstep, came from the shadows beyond the yew trees. He turned sharply, but there was nothing visible save the flutter of a blackbird. Still, he listened, eyes half closed, and then nodded to himself. Someone follows again, he murmured. Not the niece this time. A heavier tread, male, the curiosity grows. They reached the inn just as evening settled. Poirot ordered tea, his movements calm, but his mind turning rapidly. Tomorrow, Inspector, he said finally, we shall see Dr. Wilby and the gardener. The truth, she is close. The dead woman's last gift was not a brooch, it was a confession wrapped in silver paper. And as the candlelight flickered across his face, Poirot's eyes shone with the quiet certainty of a man who had begun to see the shape of the crime beneath its polished disguise. The next morning dawned grey and wind-stirred, the kind of a day that promised unease. Clouds rolled low over Kingswell, and a faint drizzle darkened the cobblestones. Poirot was already awake, impeccably dressed, his moustache gleaming despite the gloom. He sat by the inn's window, sipping his coffee with deliberate calm as the inspector arrived, shaking rain from his coat. "You're up early," Dale muttered, eyeing the detective's untouched breakfast. "Couldn't sleep?" "On the contrary," said Poirot smoothly. "I slept excellently. But the mind, she does not rest even when the body does. She whispers to me in the night, 'Look closer, Look again." He rose, buttoning his coat. "Come, Inspector. We pay a visit to Dr. Wilby. He will tell us what the body could not." The doctor's surgery sat at the edge of the village, a squat building with ivy choking its walls. Inside, the smell of disinfectant lingered beneath a layer of old paper and damp wool. Dr. Wilby, a broad-shouldered man with tired eyes and nicotine-stained fingers, greeted them with polite reluctance. "I've told the police everything already," he said, gesturing to a chair. Lady Whitmore's heart gave out. Simple as that. Simple? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Perhaps. But simplicity, Doctor, is often the disguise behind which truth conceals her complexity. Tell me, you found nothing unusual? Wilby hesitated, his hands fussing with a medical file. Nothing conclusive. The heart was weak, yes. But there was a faint odor. Almond, perhaps. I couldn't be sure. The tests showed nothing. Poirot's head tilted. Almond? You are certain? Certain enough to doubt myself. The doctor replied gruffly. If it were cyanide, there should have been clear evidence. There wasn't. I sent samples to London. The results haven't come back. Poirot exchanged a glance with Dale. Then we must assume two possibilities. Either the poison was of a rare and delicate sort, or there was no poison at all, only a fright cleverly induced. Induced? Dale asked. Poirot spread his hands. The mind, mon ami, can kill as effectively as any toxin. Fear, guilt, shock. These things strike the heart like lightning. But to cause such a death, the killer must know precisely where the heart is weakest. Someone who understood her nature. Exactly, said Poirot softly. Merci, Doctor. You have given me much to consider. They left the surgery and turned down the lane leading to the gardener's cottage. The air was heavy with rain now, and the gardens of Whitmore Manor shimmered under the grey sky. The gardener, a wiry man named Briggs, stood by the greenhouse, pruning roses that had long since lost their bloom. He looked up as they approached, suspicion etched deep in his weathered face. Not much left worth looking at, he muttered. Flowers die easy when no one tends them. Like their mistress, Poirot murmured, his gaze sweeping over the barren beds. You tended Lady Constance's gardens long? 20 years. She liked things neat, didn't like weeds or surprises. Yet she received a parcel, a surprise indeed, Poirot said. Tell me, did you see anyone near the house that evening? Briggs hesitated, glancing at Dale before replying. Maybe I did. Hard to say. Someone came up the path after dark. I was locking up the shed. Small figure, wearing a cloak. Could have been a woman. Could have been the niece. Poirot's eyes sharpened. You are sure of that? The gardener scratched his head. No, sir. But she walked quick, like she knew where she was going. Didn't knock, just left something by the door and went off again. Poirot's expression did not change, but the faintest hum escaped him, a note of recognition, perhaps satisfaction. Merci, Monsieur Briggs. You have watered a very dry plant. As they walked away, Dale exhaled sharply. So, Anna left the parcel after all. Perhaps. Or perhaps she wished someone to think she did. You see, my friend, the true artist of crime paints not with blood, but with illusion. What better disguise than grief? They reached the main road, the rain now falling in earnest. Poirot paused, gazing toward the churchyard where Lady Constance was buried only days before. Tell me, Inspector, he said quietly, have you considered that the gift, the dove brooch, might have been meant not as a message to the dead, but as a warning to the living? Dale blinked. Warning? Oui, Poirot said. A signal of guilt unspoken. Someone in this village carries a secret that Lady Constance unearthed. The dove symbol of peace was not an offering. It was a demand. Be silent. Forgive me. Forget. As they turned back toward the inn, a carriage clattered past, its wheels splashing mud. Poirot stepped aside, watching intently. Inside sat a man he had not yet seen, a stranger in a dark coat, his eyes fixed straight ahead. The carriage did not slow, but Poirot's gaze followed it until it vanished around the bend. "There," he murmured, almost to himself. "The shadow lengthens. The game begins to play itself." And somewhere in the grey stillness of Kingswell, behind closed curtains and whispered prayers, a secret trembled, waiting for Poirot's little grey cells to tear away its last veil. The rain had ceased by afternoon, leaving the village cloaked in a hush more unsettling than the storm itself. The air was damp and heavy, the clouds hanging low as though the sky itself held its breath. Poirot walked slowly along the narrow path back toward the manor, his cane tapping rhythmically against the stones. Every movement was measured, deliberate. His mind, however, moved like lightning. Inspector Dale trudged beside him, his boots caked with mud, his patience wearing thin. "You've been silent for half an hour," Dale muttered. "I can tell you're thinking something, and I don't like the sound of it." Poirot smiled faintly. "You are right, mon ami. I am thinking something very delicate. Something that requires finesse. It concerns the arrival of that mysterious carriage." "The stranger?" Dale asked, glancing back down the lane. "You think he's connected?" Poirot nodded slightly. "The timing, Inspector. Always, it is the timing that betrays the truth." A stranger appears. Just as the investigation begins to close in. He does not come for the funeral too late. He does not come for business too sudden, and yet he comes, as though summoned by guilt itself. They reach the gates of Whitmore Manor, where the house loomed in grey silence. Poirot stopped, studying the windows, each one dark except for the faintest flicker of movement behind the drapes. "Someone watches," he murmured. "It is always thus. In these villages, every eye is a curtain." Inside, the atmosphere was unchanged, that peculiar stillness of a house whose mistress had died suddenly. Poirot motioned for Dale to remain by the door while he examined the drawing-room once more. The chair where Lady Constance had sat remained exactly as before, covered with a sheet, her teacup replaced carefully upon the table by some dutiful hand. The faint scent of lavender lingered, though Poirot caught something else beneath it, something metallic, elusive. He bent closer, eyes narrowing. The tea, she was half drunk, not abandoned suddenly, but finished calmly. This was no panic, no terror. Lady Constance accepted death as she accepted her tea with civility. Dale frowned. Meaning, said Poirot, straightening. That she expected it. The inspector stared at him. Expected to die? That makes no sense. None, my friend. It makes perfect sense if she believed she deserved it. Poirot turned, surveying the room. His gaze lingered upon a photograph upon the mantelpiece. A young man in military uniform, dark-eyed, smiling faintly. He lifted it delicately. "Who is this?" "That's her son," said Dale. "Arthur Whitmore. Died 15 years ago in France. Left a bad debt behind him, I hear." Poirot's eyes glimmered. "Ah, tragedy, it is the seed that grows into many poisonous flowers. A dead son, a guilty mother, a letter accusing her conscience. Do you not see, mon cher? The past." She returns to collect her due. As he replaced the frame, the door creaked open behind them. Anna Whitmore stood there, pale, her eyes wide with something between fear and defiance. "You shouldn't be here," she said sharply. "The house is private now." Poirot bowed slightly. "Forgive me, mademoiselle, but sometimes a room speaks louder than a person. And this room, she whispers secrets." Anna's voice trembled. "You think you know everything, don't you? But my aunt, she destroyed lives with her charity. You have no idea what she was capable of." "Then enlighten me," Poirot said softly. Anna hesitated, gripping the doorframe. "You think she was a saint, but she ruined people. The Allards, the Cranes, even my father. She gave, but she gave to own." And when people refused her help, she punished them. That's why half the village hated her. Hatred, mademoiselle, is a strong motive for murder, Poirot said gently. Her expression flickered. I didn't kill her. I did not say that you did, he replied. But you know who might. Anna's composure faltered for the first time. Her hands clenched tightly, her eyes darting toward the window. There's someone you should speak to, she whispered. Someone who had more reason than anyone. But he's not from the village. He came here before the funeral, said he was a friend from long ago. His name is Marcus Vale. Poirot's brow lifted. Marcus Vale, the stranger in the carriage. Yes, he and my aunt. They had a history, something dark. She wouldn't speak of it, but when she saw his letter last week, she went pale as death. That's when everything changed. Poirot exchanged a quick glance with Dale. And where might we find this, Monsieur Vale? He's staying at the old guest house by the Mill Road, but be careful, Monsieur Poirot. He's not the sort of man who tells the truth easily. Poirot inclined his head. Ah, then we shall speak his language, half-truths and silences. As they left the manor, the wind picked up again, carrying with it the faint scent of damp roses. Poirot stopped once more at the gate, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the guest-house roof just broke the mist. You see, Inspector, he murmured, the dead woman did not die from poison or fright alone. She died from the return of something she had buried long ago. And now, the past has come to Kingswell to finish its work. Dale shivered. You think this Vale fellow's the key? Poirot smiled faintly. Non, my friend. He is not the key. He is merely the hand that holds it. But soon, very soon, we shall see what lock it opens. The road to the guest house wound through the edge of Kingswell, where the trees grew close enough to hush even the wind. Dusk had begun to fall again, the sky a bruised violet, and the air smelled faintly of wet soil and wood smoke. Poirot and Inspector Dale approached in silence, their figures small beneath the arching branches. A lantern burned in one window, a single, unwavering light, as if waiting for them. Marcus Vale was a tall man, gaunt and elegant, with streaks of silver at his temples that did not quite match the youth of his features. His eyes were sharp, restless, and carried the weary polish of someone who had seen more of life than he wished to remember. When he opened the door, his tone was smooth, but his gaze darted with quick calculation. Gentlemen, he said, stepping aside. You must be the detective everyone's whispering about. I was wondering when you'd arrive. Poirot smiled politely. And I, Monsieur Vale, was wondering when you would appear. You come to Kingswell not for the funeral, not for business, yet you arrive just as death begins to disturb its peace. It is a coincidence most curious. Vale gestured for them to sit. I came because I was summoned by Lady Constance herself. He poured a glass of brandy and sat opposite, the firelight flickering across his face. She wrote to me last week. Said she wished to make amends. For what? She didn't say. But I knew. Poirot's brow lifted. And what was it then? This thing that required forgiveness. Vale's jaw tightened. 20 years ago, I was engaged to her daughter, Eleanor. She died before we could marry an illness, they said. But it wasn't illness. It was despair. Lady Constance ended the engagement herself. She said I was beneath her daughter, that I sought the Whitmore fortune. Eleanor never recovered from the humiliation. The room seemed to close in around them. Poirot leaned forward slightly, his voice soft. And you have carried this bitterness since? Vale's gaze did not waver. Bitterness? No. Regret, perhaps. She wrote to me after all these years, saying she wanted to speak, to right old wrongs. But before I could meet her, he spread his hands in a gesture both helpless and practiced. You know the rest. Inspector Dale spoke up gruffly. You expect us to believe that you came to make peace. You arrived the night she dies, and by morning she's in her chair, dead, clutching a gift that appears out of nowhere. Vale's lips curved in a cold smile. You think I killed her? Poirot interjected gently. No, monsieur. I think you frightened her. Something flickered across Vale's face, pride or guilt. It was hard to tell. I never saw her, he said after a pause. She was already gone when I arrived. The housekeeper turned me away. Yet someone saw you near the manor, Poirot said quietly. A small figure in the dark, leaving something at the door. Vale's composure faltered for the briefest moment. That wasn't me, he said quickly. But I did send her something days earlier. A brooch. The dove. It belonged to Eleanor. The silence that followed was heavy and electric. Poirot's eyes gleamed, and Dale's pen froze halfway over his notebook. The dove, Poirot repeated softly. You sent it. Yes, Vale said. A gesture of remembrance. To remind her what she'd destroyed. I never meant her harm. Poirot rose, his expression unreadable. Monsieur, intentions are curious things. They begin pure, but they grow corrupt under the weight of the past. He paused, his voice quiet but precise. Lady Constance received your gift, opened it, and within an hour, she was dead. You say you did not mean her harm. Yet the heart reacts not to poison alone, but to shock. It seems, perhaps, you killed her without touching her. Vale stood abruptly, his calm fracturing. You can't prove anything. Poirot's tone was almost kind. I do not wish to prove. I wish to understand. Tell me who else knew of your arrival. No one, except perhaps her niece, Anna. Dale looked sharply at Poirot, but the detective only smiled faintly. Ah, Mademoiselle Anna. She knew, of course. As they left the guest house, the rain began again, thin and whispering against the earth. Dale exhaled. So that's it? The lover returns, sends a trinket, and the old woman dies of shock. Poirot shook his head. None, my friend. It is never so simple. The gift was only the match. Someone else provided the flame. They walked on in silence, their footsteps echoing in the wet dark. Behind them, the single light in the guest-house window dimmed, and somewhere, unseen, a figure moved at the edge of the path, watching, waiting, the faint glint of a silver object catching the last light of the dying day. The rain that night seemed endless, whispering against the inn's windows as though the village itself sought to speak. Poirot sat in a small armchair by the hearth, his silhouette framed in flickering amber light, his fingers pressed together beneath his chin. Inspector Dale paced restlessly before him, boots creaking on the old wooden floor. So, Dale said at last, Vale sends the brooch. The old lady opens it, dies from the shock, and you think someone else knew all along? I can't follow the thread, Poirot. Poirot did not look up. Ah, but it is because you look for threads that you become entangled, my friend. I, on the other hand, look for the weave. This tragedy, it is not one thread, but many. The lover who returns, the niece who watches, the lawyer who profits, the villagers who whisper it, is like a tapestry. You must see it, whole. Dale frowned. You're saying Anna's involved again? Poirot's gaze lifted, sharp and unreadable. I say only that she stands too close to every truth. She knew of Vale's arrival before I did. She warns me to be careful of him, yet she hides her own fear too neatly. It is not grief I see in her, it is dread. The wind rattled the window panes, and the fire crackled. Poirot leaned forward, speaking more softly now. Monsieur Vale is guilty, yes, but not of murder. He sent the brooch, and that act struck the spark. Yet it was another who arranged for the flame to find its mark. Someone who knew Lady Constance would react as she did. Dale rubbed his temple. Then who? The housekeeper? The lawyer? Poirot smiled faintly. Perhaps both have secrets, but only one person had the right to know that the brooch would come, that it would be opened at a precise time. Someone who controlled what entered the house, and when. Murmured. Poirot nodded once. Just so. We must speak with her at once. They found her the next morning at the vicarage. where she had gone to stay since the death. A timid girl named Elsie, no more than 19, her eyes swollen from sleepless nights. She trembled when Poirot addressed her, as if the memory itself could wound her. "I didn't mean no harm, sir," she whispered. I did what I was told." Poirot's tone was gentle, almost fatherly. "And who told you, ma petite?" Elsie hesitated, twisting her apron. "Miss Anna," she said. "If a parcel arrived, I was to leave it on the doorstep, didn't matter who brought it. Said Lady Constance was expecting it and wanted no one to interfere. I thought it strange, but she was family, so I did as she asked." Dale's eyes widened. "So Anna knew about the parcel before it came?" Elsie nodded, tears glistening. "She even gave me the silver ribbon to wrap it proper. Said the lady liked things neat." Poirot's voice softened to a whisper. "And the handwriting on the label, did you see it?" "Yes, sir. It was already there when Miss Anna handed me the box." When they left the vicarage, Dale's temper broke. "So she planted the gift herself, knew it would kill her aunt. Why didn't we arrest her the moment she lied?" "Because," Poirot said calmly, "we do not yet know why. A lie tells us only that truth is feared. But what truth, Inspector? That is what remains to be seen." They walked back toward the manor, where the mist still clung to the lawns like a shroud. Poirot stopped at the gate, his gaze fixed upon the house's tall windows, their glass glimmering like eyes that refused to close. "There is something missing still," he murmured. "Something small, but vital. Lady Constance's letter, the one she sent to Monsieur Vale. It has not been found." Dale frowned. "Couldn't it have burned with her papers?" None, Poirot said. "She kept her letters. A woman like that, sentimental, proud she would never destroy her own words. Someone took it." They entered through the kitchen door, the silence of the house unnerving. Poirot moved ahead, his shoes clicking lightly on the tiles. He paused suddenly, his eyes catching a glimmer beneath the table. Bending down, he retrieved a small envelope, damp and torn at the edges. The handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, slanting. "It seems," he murmured, "that even the guilty cannot resist a little carelessness." Dale leaned over his shoulder. "Is it from her to Vale?" Poirot opened it delicately. Inside were only a few lines, written in a shaky hand. "The past cannot stay buried. What was taken must be returned. You know what I mean. If you do not, I pity you more than I forgive you." No signature. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Voila! Not a plea for forgiveness, an accusation. Something was stolen. Something of great value, not money, not jewels, but a truth. He folded the letter with care, slipping it into his pocket. "Now, mon ami, we know the motive, though not yet the method. The brooch, the letter, the ribbon, all symbols. The true weapon is guilt." As they stepped back into the fading daylight, a figure appeared at the far end of the path. Anna Whitmore, her black cloak fluttering like a shadow untethered. She stood perfectly still, waiting. Her eyes met Poirot's, and in them was not defiance, but resignation. Poirot whispered, "At last, the curtain begins to rise." Anna stood motionless at the far end of the path, her figure half veiled by the drifting mist. The black cloak clung to her shoulders like liquid night, and in her pale, unwavering face there was neither fear nor surprise, only inevitability. Poirot advanced toward her slowly, his polished shoes silent upon the wet stones, while Inspector Dale followed, tense and watchful. The wind stirred the trees behind her, whispering like unseen voices conspiring in the dark. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said quietly, "you come to meet us. That is courageous or perhaps convenient." Her voice was low, steady. "I knew you'd find the letter. My aunt never hid her malice well." "Ah," murmured Poirot, "so you know of what she wrote to Monsieur Vale." "I know she blamed him," Anna replied. "Blamed him for Eleanor's death, for everything. She never forgave him, though she claimed she wanted to." That letter wasn't reconciliation, it was revenge. She summoned him here to break him a second time. Poirot regarded her closely. Then you pitied him. That is why you warned me of him? A faint smile crossed her lips, brittle as frost. No, Monsieur Poirot. I didn't pity him. I pitied myself for what I had to do. Dale stiffened. You're admitting something now, Miss Whitmore. Best you speak clearly. Anna turned her gaze on him, unflinching. I knew the brooch would come. I knew what it meant to her. The dove was Eleanor's, and she despised it. When it arrived, I could have stopped it. I could have hidden it, thrown it away, but I didn't. Poirot's expression softened, but his tone remained sharp. You say you did not kill her, and yet you allowed her to die. She was already dead, Anna said quietly, just not buried. She destroyed every life she touched. My father drank himself into the grave because of her pride. My mother left. And Eleanor, sweet, fragile Eleanor, she never recovered from that heartbreak. My aunt called it weakness. I called it murder. Poirot's eyes, dark and reflective, did not leave her face. And so you became the instrument of poetic justice. You let the past deliver its own sentence. A tear slipped down her cheek, though her voice did not waver. I told the maid to leave the parcel. I told her to tie it neatly, with a silver ribbon. I knew my aunt would open it. The moment she saw it, she could never resist a gift. But I swear, I thought it would only frighten her, not kill her. Dale stepped forward. So you admit it? You planned it? No, she whispered, shaking her head. I only wanted her to remember. Poirot sighed, folding his hands before him. Mademoiselle, remembrance can be the most dangerous poison of all. You see, Lady Constance did not die by chance. She died because someone ensured the conditions of her death were perfect, timed, arranged, inevitable. Tell me, after you placed the parcel, did you enter the house again that night? Her eyes flickered too quick, too telling. No, she said. Poirot's voice dropped to a near whisper. But the candle in the drawing room, someone lit it after midnight. Someone who entered silently, who stood before her portrait and moved one small object upon the mantel, the photograph of her son. It was turned face down when I arrived. Not grief, but guilt turned it. So, Anna's breath caught. I didn't touch it, she said, but her hands trembled. Poirot nodded slowly. Then who did? Perhaps Monsieur Vale, or perhaps another. He turned slightly, his gaze distant. The lawyer, Monsieur Allard, he profits from her death, yes? Her estate, does it not revert under his management until a new heir is appointed? Dale frowned. That's true. There's been talk he's been drawing from her accounts already. Poirot looked back at Anna. You see, mademoiselle, guilt is a fog. It hides not only what one has done, but what one hasn't. You believed you allowed her death, but someone else ensured it. Anna's voice was a whisper now. You mean she was poisoned? Poirot nodded faintly. Yes, not by the brooch, but by what she drank. The tea. The scent of almond that lingered it was faint because the dose was small, enough to fail unnoticed by crude tests, enough to mimic the stopping of a weak heart. Dale's voice rose. Then it wasn't her niece, it was the lawyer. Perhaps, Poirot said softly, but perhaps the truth is more delicate still. A murderer who hides behind coincidence is clever. Yes, but a murderer who understands human guilt and uses it to mask his act, that one is artistic. He turned back to Anna, his eyes bright with that sharp, uncanny intelligence. You, mademoiselle, are innocent of the act but guilty of the stage. You arranged the scene upon which another played his crime. Anna's face paled, her lips parting as realization took hold. Then I was used, she breathed. Allard, he knew what I was doing. He came that night, I thought he was gone. Poirot inclined his head gently. And now, mademoiselle, we know whom the dove sought to forgive. But the question that remains is who taught the dove to fly? The last of the light had faded from the sky, and the church bell struck 6. Anna turned toward the manor, its windows glowing faintly in the distance, and her voice trembled. "He's there now," she whispered. "I saw him go in. He said he was collecting papers." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Then come, Inspector. Let us visit the fox in his den before he decides to vanish into the night." The wind had risen by the time they reached Whitmore Manor again, bending the trees like dark silhouettes bowing to an unseen force. The gravel crunched under their feet as Poirot, Dale, and Anna approached the house, its windows glowing faintly with the weak yellow light of a single lamp. It was nearly night, and the air felt thick with something unspoken anticipation, perhaps, or fear. The front door stood ajar. Poirot's eyes flicked to it instantly. "Do you see, Inspector?" he murmured. "When the door to truth stands open, it is rarely an invitation. It is a trap." Dale drew his revolver as they stepped inside. The hall was dim, the faint hum of the storm outside echoing through the rafters. Somewhere deeper in the house, a soft rustle, a drawer closing, paper shifting. Poirot gestured for silence. They moved toward the study, the light spilling faintly beneath the door. Inside, Peter Allard stood by the desk, a folder clutched in one hand, a candle burning beside him. He looked up as they entered, and though his face betrayed surprise, it was brief and calculated. "Monsieur Poirot," he said smoothly. "Inspector, you startled me. I was gathering Lady Constance's documents for the trustees." "Indeed," said Poirot. "And you choose this stormy night for such diligent work?" "How admirable." Allard smiled, the expression too polished to be sincere. "The trustees meet tomorrow. I wanted everything in order." Poirot advanced a step, his voice low and steady. "Order, monsieur, is an admirable pursuit. It is also, when too meticulous, the favorite disguise of guilt." Allard's brow furrowed slightly. "I don't follow." "Allow me to assist," said Poirot. "You were the last to see Lady Constance alive. You had quarreled with her over her will. When she died, her estate reverted temporarily to your management, giving you both access and motive. You knew of the letter she sent to Monsieur Vale, because she dictated it through you. And you knew, when that letter was sent, that her meeting with him would reopen an old wound perhaps too deep for her heart to bear." Dale stepped closer, his tone sharp. "We know you poisoned her tea, Allard." A flicker barely perceptible crossed the lawyer's face, a tightening of the jaw, a dart of the eyes toward the teacup that still sat preserved upon the sideboard. He recovered quickly, but Poirot had already seen it. "You cannot prove that," Allard said evenly. "The doctor found no poison." "Ah," Poirot said, smiling gently. "But the doctor looked for a poison in the body. Not in the cup, not in the spoon. A very small trace, delicate as perfume cyanide disguised beneath the faint scent of almond oil. Enough to stop a frail heart without leaving a trace once dissolved. You see, monsieur, the criminal genius is not in the killing, it is in understanding how the world refuses to see." Allard's voice hardened. "You have nothing but guesses." Poirot's eyes glittered. "Guesses? No. Logic, monsieur. The maid left the parcel, yes, but you told her where to place it. You signed the estate documents before the death was even confirmed. And you turned the photograph of her son face down after she died because it was he who once exposed your first theft, was it not? The embezzlement you buried under charity accounts. Lady Constance discovered the discrepancy last month. She called you to account and you silenced her before she could act." Allard's calm faltered now. "You can't prove any of that?" he hissed. "Oh, but I can," Poirot said softly. He reached into his coat and withdrew the letter they had found in the kitchen. Lady Constance's final letter. It was not addressed to Monsieur Vale, as you hoped the world would believe. It was addressed to the solicitor who betrayed her trust, The rest of the page is gone because you tore it away when you came to destroy the evidence. But, as with all clumsy men, you left behind what mattered most, the corner of your firm's letterhead, a foolish oversight for a man so precise. The room went still. The only sound was the ticking of the clock and the low growl of thunder beyond the windows. Allard's hand twitched toward the drawer behind him, but Dale was faster. "Don't," he said sharply. "It's over." Poirot's gaze softened, almost pitying. "You see, monsieur, guilt is an untidy guest. It always leaves traces, no matter how carefully you sweep. Lady Constance died believing she faced the sins of her past. Instead, she faced the consequence of yours." Allard slumped against the desk, the mask of civility falling away. "She would have ruined me," he muttered. "Everything I built, all of it destroyed by one old woman's vengeance. I only meant to frighten her, to make her listen. I didn't know she'd die so easily." Poirot's voice was quiet, grave. "You played at justice, monsieur, but justice does not bend to convenience. It finds its way, always." The inspector stepped forward, placing a firm hand on Allard's arm. "Peter Allard, you are under arrest for the murder of Lady Constance Whitmore." As Dale led him away, Poirot turned to Anna, who stood pale and trembling in the doorway. "Do not weep, mademoiselle," he said gently. "You have carried a burden that was not yours to bear. Your silence gave guilt its mask, but it was never you who dealt the blow." Outside, the storm had begun to ease, the clouds thinning to reveal a sliver of moonlight over Kingswell. Poirot looked up at it thoughtfully, his hands clasped behind his back. "You see, Inspector," he murmured, "the truth is like the dawn. It hides behind the darkest night, but it never fails to rise." And with that, Hercule Poirot, the little man with the impeccable moustache, turned from the house that had harbored so many lies, his step measured, his mind already moving to its next puzzle, leaving behind a village that would whisper his name long after the storm had passed. The next morning broke pale and brittle, the village of Kingswell wrapped in a strange quiet, as though the storm had drained every whisper from its streets. The manor, once a place of whispers and glances, now stood hollow under the grey dawn. Inspector Dale and his men had left with Peter Allard in custody, the sound of the motorcar fading into the hills. Yet within that silence, Poirot remained, seated in Lady Constance's drawing room, his gaze fixed on the extinguished fire as if the last embers of deceit still smouldered there. Anna entered softly, her footsteps hesitant, her black dress rustling faintly. She stopped beside him, eyes lowered. "It's over then," she said quietly. "He confessed?" Poirot nodded slowly. "Oui, mademoiselle, he confessed, though in his words there was no remorse, only justification. Such is the tragedy of those who mistake intellect for conscience." She sank into the chair opposite him, her hands trembling slightly. "He used me, didn't he? He knew I'd left the parcel. He let me believe it was my guilt that killed her." Poirot regarded her gently. "He saw the guilt in you, and he shaped it to his purpose. You were the perfect alibi, a grieving niece, too remorseful to see she was being directed. That is how evil hides, mademoiselle. It borrows the mask of sincerity." Her voice was small, almost childlike. "I wanted to make her remember Eleanor, that's all. I never meant harm. And yet," Poirot said softly, "we cannot choose how justice answers when we summon it." The rain had stopped entirely now, leaving only the faint ticking of the clock between them. Poirot rose and crossed to the window. The village lay beneath a veil of mist, its rooftops glistening. Beyond the gate, a few villagers gathered, their faces solemn. Word had already spread. Kingswell's quiet peace had been an illusion all along. Anna followed his gaze. "They'll never forget this," she said. "None," Poirot replied, "but they will invent their own ending, as all villages do. Some will say the lady was cursed, others that her sins returned to haunt her. They will not speak of the greed that hid beneath civility, that they will forget. Human nature prefers a ghost to guilt. She looked at him for a long moment. And you, Monsieur Poirot, what do you believe she deserved? Poirot turned toward her, his expression unreadable. Deserve? Ah, that is a question for God, not for Hercule Poirot. I deal only in what is. Lady Constance was a woman of pride. She gave with one hand and chained with the other. But she also suffered. In the end, her death was not murder alone, it was the consequence of a lifetime spent mistaking control for affection. The poison only hastened what her heart had already begun. He moved toward the mantel, adjusting the photograph of Lady Constance's son, placing it upright once more. The balance, it is restored, he said softly. Eleanor's memory avenged, the truth revealed. But peace, Mademoiselle Peace, is not so easily found. Anna rose, her voice trembling. Will you tell them I was part of it? Poirot looked at her a long while before answering. The world, it will know what it needs to know. The rest, let it be buried with Lady Constance. Guilt is punishment enough for the innocent. A tear escaped her, but she nodded. Poirot offered a faint smile, almost kind. You will go back to London, perhaps. Begin again. You have courage, mademoiselle. That is rarer than innocence. She whispered a thank you and left. Her figure dissolving into the pale mist, like a shadow retreating from daylight. Poirot stood alone for a moment longer, then straightened his cuffs, his gaze sweeping the room one final time, the chair by the fire, the delicate china cup, the silver brooch lying beneath its glass case, gleaming now harmlessly in the morning light. He murmured to himself, the gift that killed the village, it was not the brooch. Non, it was pride, wrapped in silver paper and tied with a ribbon of guilt. Then, with his hat perfectly adjusted and his coat immaculate despite the damp air, Hercule Poirot stepped out into the quiet morning. The village bell began to toll softly in the distance, and as he walked down the path toward the waiting car, he allowed himself a small, reflective smile. Order has been restored, he said under his breath. But if only the human heart could be arranged as neatly as the little gray cells.